You just got $100,000. Maybe it's an inheritance, a big work bonus, or the proceeds from selling something significant. Whatever the source, you're sitting there with two browser tabs open. One is a real estate listing for a rental property. The other is your brokerage account, the online platform where you buy and sell investments, sitting open to a stock index fund. You genuinely don't know which one to click. And honestly, neither does most of the internet, because this exact debate has been argued back and forth for decades without a single universally correct answer. So let's actually walk through the real math on both sides in plain language and figure out what actually wins. Let's start with the simplest version of this comparison. What happens if you just put $100,000 into stocks and left it alone? The most common benchmark for the overall stock market is something called the Standard & Poor's 500 Index, or S&P 500 for short, which tracks 500 of the largest publicly traded companies in America. Since its creation in 1957 through 2024, it has delivered an average annual return of roughly 10.5%, including dividends, meaning the portion of company profit paid directly to shareholders being reinvested along the way. Using that historical average, $100,000 invested in an S&P 500 index fund, meaning a fund that simply holds all 500 of those companies at once for broad diversification, would grow to roughly $259,000 after 10 years. This requires essentially zero ongoing effort. You don't manage tenants, you don't fix broken water heaters, and you can sell part or all of it within seconds if you ever need the cash. Now let's look at the same $100,000 used a completely different way, as a 20% down payment on real estate, which is the initial cash payment required to secure a mortgage, meaning a loan used to purchase property. That down payment would let you buy a $500,000 property. Using a reasonable assumption of 5% annual appreciation, meaning the property's value growing over time, plus modest positive monthly cash flow from rent after expenses, a 10-year projection shows the property growing to roughly $814,000 in value, while the remaining mortgage balance drops to around $320,000 through your monthly payments. That leaves you with about $494,000 in home equity, meaning the portion of the property's value you actually own outright rather than owing to the bank. Add in roughly $36,000 in accumulated rental cash flow over that decade, and your total value from that original $100,000 comes out to somewhere around $530,000. Look at those two numbers side by side. Stocks, roughly $259,000. Leveraged real estate, roughly $530,000. On the surface, real estate appears to more than double the stock market's result using the exact same starting amount. So does that settle it? Not even close. And understanding exactly why is the entire point of this breakdown. The real estate number looks dramatically bigger for one specific reason: leverage. Leverage means using borrowed money to control an asset larger than the cash you actually put in. When you buy $100,000 of stock, you need the full $100,000 in cash. When you buy a $500,000 property with a 20% down payment, you're only putting in $100,000 of your own money, but you get 100% of the appreciation on the entire $500,000 asset, not just on your $100,000 share of it. This is exactly why a relatively modest 5% annual appreciation rate on the full property value translates into a much larger dollar gain relative to your actual $100,000 investment. Here's a smaller, cleaner example that makes this even clearer. If you invest $50,000 in stocks at a 10.5% return, you earn about $5,250 in the first year. If you instead use that same $50,000 as a down payment on a $200,000 property that appreciates just 4% that year, the property gains $8,000 in value, all of which belongs to you as additional equity, since you only borrowed the rest. Add in, say, $4,000 in net rental income for that year, and your total return on that $50,000 comes out to roughly $14,000, or about 28% compared to the stock investor's $5,250, or about 10.5%. Same amount of cash invested, wildly different result, purely because of leverage. But here's the part that gets conveniently left out of a lot of these comparisons. Leverage cuts both ways, and it cuts hard. If that same $200,000 property drops in value by just 10%, which absolutely happened to many markets during the 2008 to 2012 housing downturn, your $50,000 in equity doesn't drop by 10%. It drops to $30,000, a 40% loss, because the entire decline comes directly out of your smaller ownership stake, while the mortgage balance stays exactly the same. Compare that to a 10% decline in a $50,000 stock investment, which simply becomes $45,000, a straightforward 10% loss. Leverage doesn't just amplify your gains, it amplifies your losses by the exact same multiplier. And that asymmetry is precisely why over-leveraged real estate investors got wiped out during past housing crashes, while stock investors, even ones who lost real money, generally didn't lose nearly as large a percentage of their actual cash. Let's talk about liquidity next, meaning how quickly and easily you can convert an investment back into usable cash. You can sell $100,000 of stock in about 30 seconds during market hours. Selling a rental property typically takes 2 to 4 months from listing to closing and costs another 6% to 8% of the sale price in agent commissions and closing costs. If you suddenly need cash for an emergency, stocks give you options that real estate simply cannot match. Diversification is another major difference, meaning how spread out your risk is across many different investments rather than concentrated in just one. A $100,000 investment in a broad stock index fund gives you a small ownership stake in thousands of different companies across every industry and region of the economy. A $100,000 real estate investment, even leveraged into a $500,000 property, gives you exposure to exactly one building in one neighborhood in one city. If that specific local market suffers, whether from a major employer closing, a natural disaster, or simply a declining neighborhood, your entire investment is exposed to that single point of failure in a way a diversified stock portfolio simply isn't. Now let's talk about something real estate genuinely wins on: taxes. The United States tax code is meaningfully more favorable to real estate investors than to stock investors, and this is an opinion, it's simply how the rules are written. Rental property owners get to deduct something called depreciation, which allows you to write off the cost of the physical structure, though not the land underneath it, over 27.5 years, even if the property's actual market value is increasing the whole time. On a $200,000 property where the structure itself is valued at $160,000, that works out to roughly $5,818 a year in tax deductions, purely on paper, without the property actually losing any real value. For someone in a 24% tax bracket, that's about $1,396 a year in real tax savings. On top of that, real estate investors can use something called a 1031 exchange, a specific tax rule that lets you sell one investment property and roll all the profit into a new property while deferring, meaning postponing, the capital gains tax you'd otherwise owe immediately. Stock investors get no equivalent tool. When you sell an appreciated stock, you generally owe capital gains tax that same tax year, with rates ranging from 0% to 20% at the federal level for investments held over a year, plus whatever your state charges on top of that. There's also a middle ground option worth understanding, especially if property management sounds exhausting. Real estate investment trusts, commonly called REITs for short. These are companies that own and operate income-producing real estate, but trade on the stock market just like a regular stock, meaning you get real estate exposure with stock market liquidity and zero property management responsibilities. Historically, REITs have delivered strong long-term returns, and over very long time horizons of 25 to 50 years, some research shows REITs have actually outperformed the broader stock market, partly thanks to their typically higher dividend payments. A $100,000 investment in REITs at a historical 8% average annual return would grow to roughly $216,000 over 10 years, sitting neatly between the passive stock scenario and the leveraged direct property scenario in both return and effort required. So what actually wins? Here's the honest answer. At face value, without leverage, stocks have historically outperformed real estate, with the S&P 500's roughly 10.5% average compared to unleveraged real estate appreciation of only about 3% to 5% annually. Real estate only pulls ahead once you factor in leverage, and that advantage comes bundled with meaningfully more risk, far less liquidity, concentrated exposure to a single property and location, and genuine ongoing work, whether that's managing tenants yourself or paying someone else 10% to 15% of your rental income to do it for you. Stocks require essentially zero effort and can be sold instantly, but they also expose you to real market volatility, including drops of 20% or more roughly once every 3 to 5 years, which can be genuinely stressful to sit through even when you know rationally that the market has historically recovered over time. This is exactly why most experienced, financially sophisticated investors don't actually pick one side of this debate and go all in. They hold both. Stocks and index funds provide liquidity, broad diversification, and a track record of strong long-term growth with minimal effort. Real estate, when used carefully and not over-leveraged, provides the potential for higher returns through leverage, meaningful tax advantages, and a physical, tangible asset that some investors simply find psychologically reassuring during turbulent markets. The real question isn't which one universally wins, because the honest answer is that the numbers on both sides depend heavily on your specific risk tolerance, how hands-on you want to be, and how much volatility you can genuinely stomach. The actual smartest move with that $100,000 might not be choosing one browser tab over the other at all. It might be figuring out what percentage belongs in each one.